Hey everybody, Tony here, and have you ever thought to yourself, I want to run Plex inside a Docker container on my Synology NAS? Yes? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. I'll be honest, the process of getting Plex set up inside Docker on a Synology NAS isn't really that hard. Synology provides a web interface for Docker that makes it pretty easy to manage all the things inside Docker. It is limited, you can't do everything you want, but in that case, then you can just switch over to the CLI interface of your Synology NAS and then run everything via Docker commands like you're familiar with. If you want to follow along, I do have a complete guide on how to do this at my website, lookanotherblog.com, and the link will be in the description. The first thing we got to do is obviously we need to install Docker on Synology. That's very simple. First, we're just going to go over here to Package Center and we're going to do a search for Docker. Well, and I've already got Docker installed. So if you were doing this for the first time, you would find Docker here and you just click install. It's going to download the latest Docker application for your Synology NAS and install it. Once we have that, there is more prep work we have to do. And this is Plex specific. Plex uses a lot of different ports for a lot of different services for advertisements out onto your network. One of those is port 1900 for DLNA. And by default, the file services of Synology actually is bound to port 1900 for some other things. So it's going to go in and delete and disable that service, and that will make it so we can use port 1900 for the Synology NAS. That is under Control Panel, Services, Advanced, and SSDP. Local network devices can use Windows Network Discovery to access the web interface of DSM. Here we're just going to turn this option off, so it won't be checked. Apply. Next, I need to go in and set up some folders for the Plex container. By default, all the data for a given Docker container is stored within the container itself. And that's great for being able to rebuild things quickly, but it also means if you delete that container, like for doing updates to it, all the data inside of it is deleted. So we need a place to put persistent data. That will be config files, that'll be settings, that in the case of Plex, that'll be your transcode folder, and also your media, because you don't want to put all your music and movies inside your Docker container and then go to update your Docker container and then all the data is gone. All your files are gone. So for that, I'm going to go here to File Station. I'm going to go to Docker. This is created automatically whenever you install Docker on your Synology NAS. And I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it, in this case, Docker Plex Demo. And then inside Plex Demo, I'm going to create two more folders. I'm going to create a folder called Config, and I'm going to create a folder called Transcode. And there, we got our folder set up, and now we're going to go on and actually create the container for our Plex instance. With the settings configured on the Synology NAS and the folders created, it's now time to actually install Plex inside Docker. If I go up here to all applications, there's now a new application for Docker. And it gives you, like I said, it gives you a nice web interface to look at and see how things are running. It's going to tell you what containers are running. It's going to tell you what images you've downloaded, and it's going to give you a good search tool to be able to find and install images from like the Docker Hub repository and other locations. So the first thing we need to do is we actually need to download the image for Plex. And if you go to the hub.docker.com and do a search, there's lots of different options for downloading images of Plex. This one is this is the official repository. This is the one actually built by Plex themselves. And you can go, if you don't want to use theirs, you can use other ones. They're newer, older, they may have some other tweaks in them. It's all up to you. So if I go back over here to my NAS and I go to images, I go to registry. Registry is the keyword. I can now do a search for Plex. And here, this is the first one. Now, I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to download it again, but this, if you needed to update Plex, this is how you would do it. You would download a new image. And now once it's downloaded, it shows up in my images list. These are all the images that I've downloaded to be able to actually build containers, and then containers are what actually runs the apps. So now I'm gonna go find Plex. There it is. And the next step is to launch. And this is going to launch the wizard to create a new container. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it demo Plex. And in this case, I need to actually set up more settings in here. This is giving me an error because, oh, it's spelling error. Never mind. Don't you hate it when that happens? No, I don't want to fix the spelling. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this container that if it's going to auto restart if it stops. So if for some reason, like the Synology NAS lost power and it rebooted, this would allow the Docker container to power up after the system started. Volumes. We need to add at least 3 locations for the container. Again, these are where data will be stored persistently. So we want to make sure that the Plex config files don't get wiped out when images are updated. And the transcode folder, which is that's part of the documentation over here at Plex, talks about transcode folder, media folder, and stuff. And again, the third one is the media folder. Where are you putting all your files? I'm going to go in here to files. No, I'm going to go in here to folder. Go to Docker. I'll go to Plex demo config, select. The mount path, according to the documentation, is /config, all lowercase. Add another folder, Docker, Plex demo, transcode, select, call that /transcode, all lowercase. And then next, I'm going to add another folder. I want to add my media. I've got a lot of media. And it's going to call that Plex media. And network, I'm leaving this in bridge mode. If you've used Docker before, you know that there's different ways to configure the network. For me, I'm just going to set it in bridge mode and not worry about it. Port setting. This is important for setting up Plex within the web interface. These are the ports that are coming from the Plex application, and these are the ports that it's going to map to on the Synology NAS. By default, it is auto, which means it will just pick a random port. It doesn't matter what port it is. As long as it's open on the Synology NAS, it's going to use that port. In our case, we actually want it to be whatever the source port is from the application. So we do 1900, 32400, 32410, and so on and so on and so on. I'm not going to finish that out because it's not important to show this demo. Links, we're not linking this to any other container. And then finally, environment, we want to add one more elite variable, and that is TZ for time zone. And if you're picking the time zone, the best place I found is probably PHP's documentation. Pull that up. Do that. Is you can go in here to supported time zones in PHP, and wherever you are in the world, you can find out what you want to use. In my case, I am in Eastern US, so I'm just going to pick New York. Paste that in there. And that's, oh, no, one more. There's one more variable, I lied. And that is the advertise IP. This is the IP address that is your Synology NAS itself. So on your network, it might be a 192.168, it might be a 10.0. Whatever that IP address is, you need to put that in this variable. I'll put mine in there, which you probably can't see because it's now blurred out. And this is just so it maps correctly to the internal Plex server. You can read more details over here again in the documentation of why you would do some of these parameters. And last thing to do is hit apply. So now I've got all my settings done. And if I didn't already have a Plex container running on my system, I could be able to hit next. It's going to give me, hey, here's all the settings we've got set up for you. Hope you like them. And I hit done. And it's going to complain to me because the web interface is actually checking, hey, are these ports already in use to protect you from yourself? And in my case, even though I have my real Plex container turned off, it still sees that, hey, I've got these ports in use, so I'm not going to finish the creation of this container for you. But you probably won't run into that issue when you go to set it up on your system. So that is the simple way of setting up Plex on your Synology NAS. Now you may be saying to me, Tony, I use Docker all the time. Why don't I just use the commands via command line? And the answer is you can. and maybe you should. And there's one particular reason why you would want to do this over the web interface, and that's hardware transcoding. So if you're a Plex Pass subscriber, you have access to hardware transcoding for your server. And many Synology NASs have Intel processors which may support QuickSync. This little DS220 Plus does. It's got a 2-core Celeron processor, still supports QuickSync. The problem is you can't pass the command you need for Docker through the web interface to access that hardware. You have to do it via the command line. So this example, I'm going to show you how to do pretty much what I just did in the web GUI through command line. So there's a few more things we need to set up. Let's go through that now. So first, we need to turn on console. We need to be able to access the system over SSH, because there's no graphics output on the Synology system, so you can't just plug a keyboard and mouse into it and go. You have to access it remotely via Telnet or SSH. Preferably SSH, don't do Telnet, please. So that's under here, this connectivity terminal, and enable SSH service. And then you can set the port. I'm a bad user. I'm using port 22, which is the default port for SSH, but it makes things a little bit easier in the long run. So turn that on. And then we'll go and pull up a console session to the Synology NAS. So I'm going to do SSH local. And then I'm going to do my password. And now I have console access to the Synology NAS, and then it's running a flavor of Linux. I don't know which one. I don't really care. And we can run Linux commands in it and do stuff. And yeah, it says don't run things as root, but we're going to have to run things as root. The first thing we need to do is we need to grant access to the transcoding hardware in the Synology NAS so Docker can use it. And the simple and easy way to do it is just to change the access the permissions to it. So, and you can find documentation for this on Plex's website and their wiki in many other places and other guides. Is we're just going to change the access. So I'm going to take a command. It's sudo or sudo. We're going to do a change. We're going to chmod, and we're going to add read-write capability to basically everybody to access dev dri star. And this is how Plex is able to plug in and get access to hardware transcoding. So run that. It's going to ask for my password just so I can do the sudo command. The password incorrectly. There we go. All right, so now I've changed the permissions to any device that's listed under that directory. If I do -L, you can see that there is the card 0 and render D128. So that is the stuff that Plex is going to plug into, and now everybody, so owner, group, and everybody has read-write access to that hardware. You may have to run this command on reboots, and maybe after like firmware updates to the Synology NAS. I've not actually verified that, but if you do updates and you start running into issues with hardware transcoding, go check out and see if you need to reapply these permissions. So next command is we're going to, just like before, we're going to download the Docker image. And as the documentation at the hub said, we're going to do docker pull Plex inc pms -docker. And because I'm running this on Synology NAS, I need to do sudo at the start of this. Now again, I'm not going to do this right now because I've already downloaded it and I don't want to mess with my already built Docker container, but this is how you would download the latest image. And then finally, we are going to build our Docker command. And I'm just going to copy this again out of my website, lookanotherblog.com. I have all the details and instructions on how to do this. I'm going to paste it in here to a notepad so we can make some changes. So I'm going to change it to Plex Docker demo will be the name of the container. Here's all our port mappings like before, our time zone, our IP address, and then what the host should maybe called internally. And then we're going to map all of our settings. And share media. That's good. do that. I'm going to change this to media, because this is the location on the actual NAS, and this is the location inside the Docker container. And then finally, this parameter, that's what's called in Linux, this is what allows Plex container to access the hardware of the Synology NAS. And then finally, what image is it actually going to run? And then that's it. So I'm just going to take this command, copy it, go back to my PowerShell session, no, SSH session inside PowerShell, and paste it. And it's going to say, hey, you sure you want to do this? Yes. And then that's it. So now if I hit enter, it's now building a new container based on this Docker image, and it's done. So if I go, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes this works immediately, sometimes it doesn't. If I go back to Docker inside the web interface and go to containers, want to see it? Nope, I don't see it yet. The new container I just built will show up here as run, and it should say is running. So sometimes it shows up immediately, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, you know, if you reboot the NAS, it'll show up with no issues. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to see if I can actually access the new Plex server from my desktop. I'm going to type in manage, because I've had some issues getting to the actual setup interface of the new servers, and some guides online said, hey, go to /manage, and that usually will kickstart it and get it working. All right, and I've already signed in with my Plex account on this browser, so now it's like, hey, welcome to Plex. Are you sure you want to start using this? They sign in. And if all goes well, this will add us to the setup. And this is another thing I've been running into when I've been trying to go through and proof this demo, is it will just start hanging on the setup screen a couple of times. So if I just hit F5, it would pop up which user you're going to use. And now it's like, hey, welcome to Plex. Let's add some media. Let's give it a name. Next. And again, it's locking up. I'm just going to hit F5 again. Got it. I'm just going to click next then. Okay. And then I'm going to go into, let's get some TV shows. No, let's get some music. Browse. I'm going to go Plex Media. I'll go down to music. Music. Oh, no. Let me browse it correctly. So Plex, music, my music. There we go. Add that folder. Add library. Finish. Done. Now, if that all worked correctly, there's now, again, this is my productions. This is my actual server. So now I have a new library, music, and it is now scanning all of my music library and adding it into the Plex instance. And that's it. The setup's complete. I now have Plex running inside Docker on my Synology NAS. So now that Plex is running, how do I update it? Because I can't just go up here to activity and say, oh look, there's a server update available. I just can't download it and install it. That doesn't work inside containers, even though it is downloading a deb file. Kind of funny. So instead, you have to actually update the container itself. And this is probably the scariest thing of working with Docker, is the way you update a container is you destroy it and create a new one. Yeah, it's that scary. So if I go over here to Synology, what I would do is I would go back to registry. I would search for Plex. I would find Plex. I would download it again. And I'm just going to pull the latest tag. Select. And let's see. There it is. And then what I would do is, if I was running it, if I'd built it through the web through the web interface, I would go find my Plex container, actions, and reset. So what reset does is it deletes the container, it keeps all of its settings, and then replaces that container with the newest image that I just downloaded. Again, it is scary. That's why you need to have persistent folders for important things like the Plex config file and your media file. Transcode, I guess that's if you're doing optimized. I'm assuming that's if you're doing optimized versions, like you're transcoding them ahead of time. Actually, no, I think it actually uses it for live transcoding too. Anyway, you need to keep that stuff persistent, and that's what those volumes of folders are for. Hey, look, it actually finished downloading. Awesome. Now I would go into containers and I would go update it. If you wanted to do this through the CLI, again, you probably need to do that if you're going to be using that device parameter. Keep this command around. So this command you ran, so sudo docker run, all these options, keep those because you're going to need them to rebuild your image. What you would do is you would say, download the latest Docker image. I want to say it's already downloaded. Yep, it's already updated because I just updated it through the web interface. And then I called it Plex Docker demo. So I'm going to do sudo docker stop Plex Docker demo. Wait for it to stop. It does take a few seconds. Stop. It's probably because it's still trying to index all of the music library. I'm going to remove it. This is the scary part. It's deleting the container. And now go back to here, copy that entire command, paste it, and run it. And then once that is done, go back over here and refresh. About to load. And this is, like I said, I've been having some issues. It's started maintenance task, so it's actually doing some updates. That's back up and running. And now, hey, look, it is now up to date. That's all I have for you today. Again, really, really easy to get Plex running inside Docker on Synology. Go try it out yourself and let me know if it works for you. This has been Tony. Until next time, have fun.